Thank you again so much for agreeing to speak with us and be a part of the 4A's Look Ahead initiative. As we've talked in the past, our goal here is really to help agencies anticipate and prepare for the major shifts that are happening in the industry. There are no right or wrong answers. This is all about getting your perspective based on your experience and how you're seeing the world happen. So, as we're doing this, we're exploring how agencies and marketers might evolve over the next few years. And to kind of frame that discussion, we're kind of considering two potential futures for the industry. One where agencies really become more technology-driven solutions, so almost like platform providers and technology providers, and others where they really reassert and double down on their role as strategic advisors and kind of creative resources and homes. And as I think about, I'm particularly interested to talk to you as I think about like Dentsu's push towards modern creativity and a more connected and integrated model. As you think about creativity, media, and CX coming together, I'm kind of curious to see how you think about these futures playing out. But so I think for my first question, if you don't mind, I am just curious to think, how do you feel like the role of the agency for the future is being shaped by technology, client insourcing, and AI, some of these forces that we're certainly dealing with right now?
So it's a good question. It's a big question. I think the agency of the future is really a dynamic, adaptive partner. I think it's serving as both a steward of both technology and a champion of human creativity. It's one that recognizes in order to drive transformation, no two solutions are the same. I think agencies that connect creativity, technology, and media to build
Hmm.
systems that scale, evolve, and perform are the ones that are going to thrive. So the role is less about delivering, one-off campaigns or just creating content. It's more about transforming businesses through really end-to-end solutions, embedding AI, embedding data, and connected workflows into that creative process. We've been particularly focused on transformation when it comes to, this broad term called the content supply chain for clients. And I think through that work, there's also an opportunity for agencies to serve as a catalyst
Hmm.
for clients' own transformations, which makes us, truly a very embedded business partner with them.
So, but building off of that, like as you agencies are starting to act maybe more like platforms or enterprise partners, what are you hearing clients say that they need from you?
You know, Clients are going to need agencies to be the experts who know what they need before they do.
Yep.
I think they need us. One interesting component of that is we're hearing clients ask us to help them maximize the value of their technology investments.
Mm-hmm.
How do we help act as the hub of that content supply chain? How do we guide them through transformation? And so that's everything from providing strategic partnership, it's leveraging tools across many diverse brands. How do you turn ultimately technology into not just efficiencies, but measurable growth?
Yep.
I think agencies must offer fully integrated AI workflows. We need to upskill our talent. And the ability to merge media and creative disciplines to deliver faster, more personalized, and more impactful results is also, really critical. Um, how we work with clients, transparency, trust, increasingly seamless collaboration will be essential. I'll give you one example. We have a client, happens to be Adobe, who leverages a lot of their own tools and technology, including Workfront as a workflow management tool. And we leverage Workfront, and we have fused our Workfront instance to Adobe's Workfront instance. So when you start to think that way, you start to think about a whole new layer of collaboration that agency and client can have, everybody working off the same shared workflow system of record. And, that is a pretty dramatically different way of working than agencies and clients have had in the past.
I love that. I mean, I think as we get more into this AI-enabled future, that's a great example of just, it's going to force, but also enable just much deeper collaboration, I think, between clients and agencies as well, which, the more we're integrated and in their pipes, the better
That's right.
we are. So on the flip side of that rosy narrative, is there something that gets lost if agencies start to move too far towards being systems or solutions providers? Is there something that, versus more the creative strategists or some of those traditional roles
Yeah.
that we played?
Well, I'll share sort of two points of view. One is more of a technology oriented point of view, which is I think sometimes agencies become too enamored of their own proprietary platforms. And
Mhm.
really, what we need to do is be building open and interoperable platforms. And that's not only so that we can help clients, plug into whatever technologies or integrate with whatever technologies clients have already invested in, but it's also because it's not just about what tech you've invested in today, but with the
Right.
industry being disrupted and moving so fast, whichever future tech investments you make, we want to be able to integrate with. And so being interoperable by design and not really a walled garden is really important. The technology is just changing so fast, and we don't even know
Yeah.
what tomorrow will hold necessarily. So I think that's one component. On a more macro level, if agencies evolve too far in the spirit of this, technology-driven future, I think the risk is in discarding the human context that drives differentiation. And you know, I'll give you an example. We just in our CMO report, we surveyed CMOs about how they feel about this. 71% of CMOs say that if they don't win the algorithm, their content will be invisible. At the same time, 79% of them say, well, optimizing for the algorithm risks creating a sea of sameness where all brands start to look the same. And so, in this business, context is everything, human context. And without that context to inform the creativity and without, great creative ambition, what we're talking about is
Yeah.
big catalyzing ideas. I think we risk being generic and lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. So if we think then about, all right, so that's kind of looking at the one model around, going more down the platform and technology provider path. It was, we think about it as, agency as strategic partner and kind of doubling down on that side for that model. What do you see that starting to look like in a time when we're starting to see execution really become more automated and there's a future where that becomes even more so. So if we get out of the, if we're out of the execution game, how does that impact our model and what does that look like in terms of what we're providing? Or is that even what gets lost there, I guess?
Yeah, well, when execution is largely automated, I think, the agency as strategic partner model has to be about going beyond efficiency.
Mhm.
Automation is just the starting point. It's just, it's like table stakes. The real opportunity, I think, is using automation and AI and technology to unlock exponential growth and effectiveness. It's almost like, we have this phrase that we like to talk about, which is we want to be a superhuman agency. So how do we use those tools and technologies to augment our teams, making us superhuman? And I think, even like when you think about, and I've talked about integration of media and creative and technology here, but when we're seeing, content creation and distribution move closer together, that doesn't change the importance of strategic inputs. I mean, agencies I don't think can afford to just be a series of transactional steps. We need
Yeah.
to really be a complete and end-to-end engine connecting creativity, technology, and media to deliver what are, dynamic but ultimately measurable solutions that should drive growth, not just efficiency.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. So, as you guys are evolving, how are you thinking about reinventing your business model, whether it's around, the talent you have, IP, compensation models, ownership? Like, what do you see as being essential shifts for you to be able to thrive in that next era?
We've been investing in integrated AI workflows, upskilling talent to think laterally, to leverage new technologies. We've been building proprietary tools that, are meant to enhance day-to-day work. I think, that business model continues to shift toward transparency, greater collaboration, more shared ownership of outcomes. We are granting access to our teams to tools like Copilot and Adobe Firefly. We're providing training sessions, live workshops, allowing our experts to teach each other. We're also building proprietary tools, and we call it for creatives by creatives or for
Mhm.
strategists by strategists. So, really involving those subject matter experts in the building of these tools. It's not something that happens over in a vacuum with a technology team that is disconnected from, the rigor of what that requires. Or the creativity of what that requires. And so that's intended to address pain points, solve needs. It's everything from using AI as a sparring partner or a creative sounding board.
Mhm.
We're really pushing our teams to think about how do you integrate that into the process more. And then I think, by fusing platforms like I gave the Adobe example. We have adopted Adobe's Gen Studio and actually augmented it with some of our own tools to create what we're calling Adobe Gen Studio Dentsu Plus. That allows us to connect directly into our clients' tech stack when our
Mm.
clients have invested in that tool suite. And, half of the Fortune 500 is on the Adobe tool suite. So it's actually allows us to create those interoperable systems that drive, yes, efficiency, cost savings, but also, growth and measurable impact. And so I think in that world, we're very much focused on how do we empower people, how do we drive more of this kind of cross-functional training, and then ultimately unlock new opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. So as we think, if we paint these two pictures of, as systems provider and as kind of strategic creative advisors, is one direction more viable than the other as you think about the future?
I actually think both of those have to be viable together.
Hmm.
They listen, some agencies will specialize in one thing or another. We firmly believe that the ability to bring those two things together, we think about it almost as sort of it's creativity, it's like hybrid creativity.
Yeah.
There's two types. Catalyzing ideas. What we used to think of as a big idea is now a much more active, action, energy forward notion in this idea of it's a catalyzing idea that starts something that initiates. And then those are powered by and distributed by intelligent story systems that can adapt to the realities of today's marketing ecosystem and the personalization that is now possible through data and identity. So, it's not just about creating content. It's not only about needing a system for the content. It's really about both of these things. And I think that's where it gets really exciting and really inspiring.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said. It's probably more of a sliding continuum versus two separate futures, perhaps.
That's right. And actually, one of the things we're talking to our teams about is having an understanding of both of those areas. You may not be an expert in both of them, but you have to appreciate and understand how they come together and how they fuel each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's been a lot said around, in some ways, this is not a story of technology. This is a story of leadership and change management and people, this era that we're going through. And so as I think about, how much leaders today are having to change, what's some advice that you would give to like the next generation of leaders that you think they need to know to be best prepared for the future that we're headed towards?
It sounds trite, but embrace change, lead with confidence. I think, we all know change can feel unpredictable, it can feel uncomfortable. But what we can control, I'm a big believer in focusing on what you can control, is your mindset and your skill set. And I think that's really important. And I always joke the most the hottest new skill on a resume is comfort with change or comfort with ambiguity.
Yeah.
And I really believe that. And I think if we face these shifts together, not just the technology, but also as an industry and how we think about it, how we work with it,
Mhm.
I think we'll be able to shape the future of marketing with much stronger work, even more meaningful relationships with clients. And so I think it's all about, empowering our teams to learn, to adapt, to grow. And, ultimately, that's going to be great for them wherever they go in their careers.
Perfect. So let me ask you, what am I not smart enough to have thought to ask you on this topic, or any other thoughts about where the
Oh
industry is
my
going, or
gosh.
that any predictions around what the world's going to look like for us in a year or so?
I mean, I'm not sure I'm smart enough to know what you haven't asked.
You're also welcome to say, Molly, you're brilliant, and there's nothing else.
You're brilliant, Molly. You've covered it all. I think the one very underrated challenge, perhaps,
Yeah,
that is easy to miss is this idea of change management. In some ways, building the tech or buying the tech is easy,
yeah.
but even those whose entire livelihood it is to build best-in-class software struggle to sometimes adapt it internally. And so I think, it is internally for agencies
Hmm.
not shortcutting that process
Yeah.
is really critical. I mean, we launched an initiative over this past year that will carry through 2026 called Project 007, and it's all about how do we drive that change management. And, it's everything from the motivations,
Mm.
that we need to, we need our people to adopt to, literally hard skill training to enablement access, all of that. But I think the other layer of that is also how can we help our clients with that change management? And I do think that if we can help transform ourselves, we can actually be transformation agents for clients, kind of a low drag transformation, frankly.
Yeah.
Every big company is talking about transformation right now. And I think transforming through your media ecosystem, through your content
Yeah.
supply chain in collaboration with your agency is actually a really great place for enterprises, for brands and businesses to make real progress that has real impact attached to it at a
Yeah.
time when other types of transformations can seem slow going, hard to attach the ROI immediately. Like this is something that we can do with our clients.
Yeah, and very tangible in the results as well.
Exactly.
That's great. Listen, Abby, thank you so much. I so appreciate you
Oh
taking
my
the
gosh, my
time to share your
pleasure.
hard-won experience and insight and perspective with all of us. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you.